Hello and welcome back, everyone. Happy Friday. Today we're going to be doing a rundown of the Civilization 7 Dev Diary number 4, which we are going over all the Dev Diaries that have been released before the release of Civ 7. Notably, on February 6th, this is when the early access opens up, or where the people who bought the premium version of the game will be able to play, and we are going to be streaming both on the 6th and the 11th, the 11th being the official release. Now, I just wanted to note that the content embargo for a whole bunch of YouTubers who have gotten early access to the game, which does not include me, has been lifted. So there's a bunch of additional content on Civ 7, so if you wanted to see a combination of gameplay and a bunch of other creators' videos that they have been sitting on, having early access and released, I would encourage you to go check those out, and that might be more interesting to you than watching me go over the Dev Diary, but we did say we were going to do this, so we're going to do this. Just know that there's a whole bunch of other Civ 7 content out there that might be more appealing. But with that said, let's jump in. Greetings, Civ fans. We get the loud car outside. Greeting indeed. Sarah here. Hey, Sarah. We're finally entering the last month of 2024. Again, we're going over old ones. We're playing catch-up, extra fries, etc. But the excitement for Sid Meier's Civilization 7 doesn't stop this year. No, the train keeps it chugging. With launch arriving in just over 2 months, and by just over 2 months, we actually at this point mean like just over 2 weeks, we've got an action-packed December that includes today's Dev Diary on the Emergent Narrative system. What's Emergent Narrative, you ask? Well, why don't you tell us in a story form? Why don't you not explain it to us, show us instead what it means to be narrative in narrative form. Read on to find out, and as always, hit us up on Civ's social channels if you have any questions or just want to say hi. We do love the exclams. Bam! Exclam. Sometimes you get a double exclam. That's always really good. The chess people get it. Hi, everyone. I'm Cat Manning. Wow. Cat Manning. Is that allowed? Are you allowed to name someone Cat? That's crazy. Okay, the narrative director for Civilization 7. I don't think I've seen that before. I mean, people love cats and then they don't name their kids cats. It doesn't make sense, does it? The narrative director for Civilization 7, and I'm excited to talk about our brand new Emergent Narrative system. In this Dev Diary, I'll talk about what Emergent Narrative is, how it works, and why we decided to create it for Civilization 7 and its potential down the road for years to come. Generally speaking, a lot of strategy games, I think one of the things that they kind of often struggle with is they are much less narrative in structure, generally speaking. I think this is what makes games often appeal to a widespread audience, and so making a compelling kind of story or constructing that through while maintaining the strategy elements, there's always this weird sort of tension, because if you wanted pure story, you could play an RPG, right? But what you want is the strategic decision making as well, and so you have to, in a sense, weave it into the strategic decision making and payouts that you get for strategy, whilst trying to create a little bit of somewhat of a story arc. I do think that the age system that they've teased, if done correctly, will be pretty good for creating a narrative type of structure or feeling, in that they were saying that they aimed to, for each age, make it feel like starting kind of a new thing, and then rising action, and then sort of climax near the end of the age, and then there's this sort of falling action and reset as a new age starts. And so they've talked about wanting it to feel like a narrative rather than just like what strategy games can often feel like, in narrative-wise, often just feels like you blob, you blob, you blob, you blob, you blob, and it's just this slow, steady expansion, which doesn't exactly fit with this sort of more narrative type of lens or viewpoint. And so trying to shift the game to being more accessible, I think, to a wider audience by including narrative or more narrative consideration, I think is a good thing. But let's continue. First off, let's briefly talk about what narrative is in video games. Narrative often refers to story, plot, or themes that are that the game aims to convey to players, which provides context for the player's actions. But how that's expressed varies drastically depending on the genre. This is... okay, as far as, I understand there's a bunch of sentences that follow this, but as far as sentences that are the least story-like and most explanatory, which to me is like the opposite of narrative, this is a very explanatory sentence. But maybe, I mean, we're explaining it to strategy players, so this is probably the way to do it. But anyways, but how that's experienced varies drastically depending on the genre. Some games have linear narratives, while others have branching stories that change based on player decisions. Okay. In the case of strategy games, it often feels linear and you're just like blobbing out, and to some people the best story of all time is the line going up, but the rising action, falling action, chapters, this type of stuff is what they're trying to do here. For strategy games, especially Civilization, players often form their own story about their empire or playthrough. These stories often emerge from the choices they make and the results of those decisions. I think having characters makes it easier to identify with your nation and also play a story, so that civilization is centered around leaders rather than nations, I think adds to narrative flavor. Civ has been exploring narrative events for a while, like with the Outback Tycoon scenario in Civilization 6, but what if we could create a system that recognizes events as in-game, as open-ended as Civ is, and weave those events into a larger stories that could emerge from your choices? There we go, there's the weave. We of course do love the metaphor, and in a sense it is like the overall tapestry, right, is a strategy game, but by weaving in narrative structure into it, you give something for players to like hook onto in terms of how they are experiencing the game. When creative director Ed Beach, Life's a Beach, dig it, and I first sat down to think about what we wanted from a system like this in Civilization 7, we were driven by the idea of history built in layers, which was discussed in a previous Dev Diary. We've learned from past systems like Civ 6's gossip mechanics, where players received information about the action and activities of other civilization, and our new approach to focuses on responding to the unfolding game as it happens. At first, we created this system for specific narrative events triggered by player behavior. This meant these are meant to provide you with a snapshot of what might be happening to individual inhabitants of your empire and offer you 2 to 3 choices to make. They are less about a right or wrong answer and more about what your civilization's priorities and values are. So we have an example of the event. We have a thief at the baths. We hate to see it. A Roman Argentarius emerges from the baths only to find that his clothes have been stolen. Drat. There is only one response to this offense, a curse tablet. He pulls out his stylus and a thin slab of lead. Thieves deserve ill health. Thieves deserve sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation's a sign of ill health. I'm so tired. Just all the time. Very, very sleepy. But it looks like we will see either a culture orientation, perhaps, or this looks like a potion. I don't know if that's science, but I assume that this choice will mean that we are more culturally oriented or we're more science oriented, and it's done in a sort of narrative type of structure, but it's also going to affect our play style. And if you're playing meta, I hope that sometimes each one of these options are good, and then if you're playing like more of an RP style, then you can tell yourself a story about what your society is like and lean into that. But okay. Let's continue. However, as the system developed, a bunch of other features and mechanics started finding a use for it. Discoveries are replacement for goodies hunts. Crises, I believe this is the system by which they create that, climactic action in terms of each age feeling like a narrative cycle. You have rising action, climax, falling action, and systemically generated content meant to flesh out other parts of the game. How the system works. The Emergent Narrative system tracks major moments in your game, like battles, technological advancements, and big achievements, and responds with events tailored to your playthrough. This sounds very, very exciting, but it also sounds like something from a game design perspective that is, or not design, from the execution from a programming perspective, hard to make a system that feels dynamic in this way. It works via the modifier system, which at its core is a combination of requirements, conditions, and affects outcomes. A narrative event will wait for its requirements to be filled, which can happen at any point during the game. These requirements may vary. Some are triggered by choices of leader, reflecting stories from their lives, such as Augustus's urbanization or Benjamin Franklin's fire brigade. Shout out to Crassus's fire brigade and capitalism. Other events can be tied to your choice of civilization or specific gameplay moments. Beyond looking at game states, we also want to be able to track your decisions within the narrative events themselves. And so Oh, this sounds very exciting if it dynamically updates based on previous events that you've chosen. By applying the narrative tag in some cases, we're actually able to trigger narrative events that call back to things that have happened in past ages. This is enormously powerful as it enables our writers to tell more granular and specific stories and really create a sense of historical immersion at a level we've never done before. It's always nice when you see stuff that you haven't seen before, but one of the problems is if you play like 1,000 hours in the game, it's often hard to do this. One of the ways you can do this is with branching storylines that involve you picking certain different types of choices and playing different types of way, and then you get different types of emergent narratives in your game. We wanted to be able to answer questions we asked ourselves, like how can we tell a story about someone who was a warmonger in antiquity, but has been peaceful ever since then. With the modifier system alone, we didn't have the information needed to track that, but with narrative tags, we've opened up the possibility for stories like this and countless more. That sounds very cool. Narrative events usually, but not always, offer gameplay bonuses or such as yields or combat buffs. This is, of course, a bit of a board game type of reward, but we don't necessarily have a problem with that because Civilization plays a bit more like a board game than like an actual simulation, which of course is how you need to do a game that spans 6 millennia. The goal was to try and make the choices feel approximately equal, to not overshadow the rest of the game, and to be commensurate with the difficulty or rarity of the triggers. All this sounds great. We don't want players to feel as though they have to play with a guide open to get the results they desire, and making rewards transparent and equal balances those who min-max and those who are more interested in the choices and narrative dilemma. I'm glad that they're... So this event that we have taken a look at, this can be interesting in two ways, right? It can be interesting because you are trying to min-max and play around whatever situation you find yourself in to play for certain bonuses, right? And in this way, the game can be interesting if you're trying to approach it from a min-maxy perspective, and then if you're approaching it from an RP perspective, you could be like, well, my nation is like this, my leader's like this, and so I'm going to do that. And so it can be interesting in a different way, and it has, in a sense, that flexibility to be interesting in both ways. Whereas, like, an event that just gives a pop-up and tells you a story is only interesting to the RP person, and a thing where there's no sort of, like, narrative structure and it's just pick two bonuses, like you level up and you have a level-up tree and you can click one bonus or the other bonus, it doesn't really scratch the RP itch quite as much. And so having this dual kind of choices, I think, is going to be something that's good. But a lot of it is also going to come down to execution. They say that they hope that they're balanced, but if they're horribly unbalanced, then you'll just always choose the better choice. There are what I always yearn for is choices that are made as a result of the context, and the context changing which choice is best. Because the more often you actually need to think critically about which decision is going to be best based on your current situation, or the civ you're playing, or the civilization you happen to be occupying in your given age, I think the more enjoyable the game tends to be. There are occasional stories where results are hidden, but we hope the clarity across the vast majority of our events lets the players take a risk in these one-off situations. You'll only see a subset of these narrative events in a single campaign, which helps to make every playthrough feel unique. We love to see it. By having these occasional moments of mystery, we hope that all types of players will partake in their experience of the unknown, both the meta seekers and the RP seekers, this type of thing. Types of narrative events. As we've mentioned before, there are a bunch of different types of narrative events. Some are linked with your leader choice, some to your civ choice, and others aren't specific either. When writing our narrative events, there are several broad categories we got excited about. Historical events. These highlight moments of large and small from history that align with your gameplay. You may see ancient medicinal discoveries, daring prisoner escapes, chariot riots, artistic feuds, and enormous Mongolian armies. What-if scenarios. These explore what-if questions unique to the sandbox of the nature of Civ game. For example, what could have happened if Ashoka had not been overcome with remorse at the destruction he caused and instead doubled down on a path of violence? Or if Xerxes had not been defeated and successfully completed the invasion of Greece? Okay, these are somewhat specific, but also interesting interesting what if. And then unique gameplay moments. These reflect choices you've made directly in game, showing on the ground impact of your actions during each age. Achieving a golden age with certain traditions active, choosing your religious belief, or suffering damage from wars or weather events can bring up these narrative events. Very, very cool. Narrative events. One thing I don't want, though, is to have multiple narrative events every turn. That would get somewhat tedious, so spacing them out is going to be important, I assume. Narrative events can be callback to your previous choices you made in events, and thanks to the tag system, we can tell stories across ages. I hope that there will be a system by which you can go over all your events in the postgame or something like this. They will sometimes have additional option that's only selectable if you meet requirements, usually based on your leader or civilization. Some stories will resonate with things you did in earlier ages, referencing events that happened thousands in game years ago. So, who's writing this one? That's funny as hell. Just so we're clear, Cat Manning. Just so we're clear, in game thousands of years ago, not IRL, in game. We've been playing this game for 10,000 years. We still are clicking next turn. Okay. Discoveries are a subset of narrative events that only occur on the map and replace goodie huts from previous games. Instead of a small phrase and a standard reward, you'll have a short snippet of text giving you a bit of flavor as to why you're getting these rewards. Unlike goodie huts, discoveries now have a choice between their bonuses, allowing you to have some influence over your early game boost. You really, really love this, especially, so thinking from a more meta perspective, generally speaking, choice smooths out. When you have choices, this smooths out quite a lot variance. And what the goodie huts have represent, if you're thinking of like competitive multiplayer Civ, what the goodie huts represent is very often you just roll the dice, and the fact that now it's you roll the two dice instead of rolling one die, and you will always pick the best option, means that the advantages you get from a goodie hut relative to other players, and also relative to other runs you experience, the variance will now be reduced. And I generally think that this is a good thing to seek. In fact, we have a bunch of Magic the Gathering cards. Let's see if we can maybe find a good example here of a thing. So we have here a card called Archmage's Charm. Okay? And in Magic the Gathering, one of the problems is you're playing with a deck of cards, right? And when you play with a deck of cards, the cards you draw are random, and this leads to an extremely high level of variance. One of the ways you can reduce variance in a game is to have multiple options. So this is a card that you sacrifice. Okay. It has 3 options. Oh my god, refocus, my guy. Right, you can counter a spell, you can make someone draw 2 cards, or you can gain control of a permanent with CMC 1 or less. And I know for those of you who don't play Magic the Gathering, that's just a lot of words, but the idea here is that, generally speaking, the card is a little overcosted for the effect you are receiving, but it is the fact that you have 3 choices that really makes the card powerful, because the card is flexible. Because now when you draw 1 card, it's not just, oh, I have to hope to high roll having the right response to a particular situation. Instead, I have 3 slightly less mana efficient ways of responding to situations, but this flexibility is going to reduce variance. Another thing that is and so, like, the presence of options when you are rolling dice for anything is the larger point I'm trying to draw here. It reduces variance, and generally speaking, reduction of variance is something that is desirable, especially in competitive contexts. Now, sometimes you maybe want to have an Uber God run, and that involves just high rolling multiple times in a row, but I think that the AI is probably just going to pick these randomly and not be picking very strategically, and so you'll probably gain an edge over the AI with this anyways, much in the similar way of you just high rolling multiple times in a row. And to some extent, the fact that you could probably outplay the AI is maybe a reason to not like having a choice, but we've belabored this too much. The reduction of variance is a really good thing, and also the choice is maybe also going to be something you can RP with. So from both a meta, competitive, because Civ 6 has a very it has a competitive multiplayer scene. I think that this change is going to be really good. We see systemic events. Systemic events are recurring gameplay moments like crises or gifts from independent powers, and they use the Emergent Narrative system to add context and personalities to some game mechanics. We see the rising storm. The civilizations of the world have risen and rise, and in their rise, others too ascend. Once metalworking, agriculture, and the growth of cities were limited to the points of the landscape, now these are commonplace in all but the most remote corners of the world. Those once thought barbarians now lay equal claim to the land, claim to the mantle of civilization, and the learning of the city centers extends beyond the boundaries of the known world. With this comes the question: why are you ascendant and we are not? The rising storm. Oh no. This is a crisis event, right? That we are getting towards the end of an age. And so I assume this perhaps makes it so that city-states and barbarians rise up against you towards the end, and that this is, this is continuing the crisis, and so maybe this is a way that this plays in and gives you a feel of, we've been expanding, we've been learning, we've been, expanding our cities, learning about technologies. I'm trying to construct this narratively and not in a meta type of way of thinking about it. We've been feeding our people, and we have been, doing good for the cause of civilization and humanity, but now the enemies are at the gates. The barbarians aren't truly barbarians, and they are suffering under the yoke and now rising up against us. And so we must defend the way of life we have constructed for ourselves. And, something like this. And this is something that an event or a crisis helps you to do. And then the resolution of this might be we put them down and we incorporated them into our empire. And now we have a more multicultural and global empire, something like this, as we enter the New Age. And in the New Age, we have another different type of crisis. Whereas crafted narrative events tell stories, systematic narrative events tend towards the informative. These are straightforward because their purposes add to narrative flair to explain how and why, rather than telling a compelling story. For example, improving relations with an independent power results in a gift. At one point in development, the gift was just floating text, but we noticed it was missed by our QA team. By making it a narrative event, we alerted the player to a reward, informed them that the relationship was improving, and added a touch of personality to the moment. This isn't just a small notification on the side. Instead, these moments feel integrated to your empire's broader story. It is important, though, that you don't have too many of these pop-ups and they don't just dominate kind of the turns. But it doesn't sound like that's necessarily going to be the case, although we'll see. There are over 1,000 narrative events for you to experience in Civilization 7 at launch. That is a lot. Further enhancing the system to ensure every playthrough feels unique. Through the Emergent Narrative system, we have the opportunity to introduce new levels of historical and what-if storytelling we've never had before. We can't wait to hear what you think when Civilization launches on February 11th, or for those of you buy the premium versions on February 6th. But that has been kind of our dev diary on narrative. Pretty excited, with some of the changes we're seeing here. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please feel to like, comment, subscribe. Again, there is a bunch more Civ 7 content out there now if you're interested in seeing more. We don't have early access, so we don't have stuff to show, but you can check that out on other YouTubers. Just enter the search stuff and you guys know how to operate YouTube. If you found my channel, man, you do. And other than that, you guys have a happy Friday.